Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to today's threat hunting workshop. We see that everyone is piling into the room right now. So we're going to give it a couple minutes just for everyone to get in, and then we'll start. Today we're joined by Alex and Kim. So say hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, everybody.
So we're going to have a really cool workshop. So Kim is going to be doing some SIM XDR type of use cases. And then I found two threat intel articles that were published about attacks on the Ukraine. So I'm going to go through those and talk about them and show you more information and talk about those. So that should be really cool for if you're following anything that's happening in Ukraine, some of these cyber attacks that have happened and that currently are happening, and potentially, you know, some thoughts around why those types of things are being attacked. So one of them is going to be talking about network attached storage and why that was attacked prior to the invasion. And like most people, it's not intuitive to think about why that would occur, but once we go through the use case at the end, you're going to go, oh, I totally get it. And you might want to get one. That's a good, like if you're a prepper, you might want a NAS. So that might be something you want to put in your backpack if you're a prepper going forward. Okay. So we have, see a few more people have joined. So give it one more minute and then we're going to start. And Josh and Jackie couldn't make it today, so we missed them, but hopefully they'll be back.
The stand-ins.
Well, not stand-ins. You guys would always be here. It's just we don't get to hear Josh's laugh and some of Jackie's comments that she makes on air and behind the scenes to me to make me laugh. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we're going to kick things off now. Okay. Did the slide progress? Because mine it looked like it
weird. It's very slow.
Okay, there it goes. Okay, so I'm Benjamin Powell. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Microsoft. Technical marketing at RiskIQ before we were acquired. My background is I was a practitioner for many years, and then went over to manufacturers that were creating security products. So I have experience working and managing teams in local government, state government, education, biotech, manufacturing, financial services, and software development. So a lot of the use cases that I'll pick and try to show you are things that I might have experienced in the past or working with a customer that had that type of situation. Now, one thing is I really enjoy spearfishing, but in our industry, that's frowned upon because they think I'm trying to steal credentials or steal your money, but I actually swim in the ocean and catch fish. And you can see some of my spear guns in my wall in the background. So we've done, over the last 4 years, I've personally trained over 10,000 analysts in these workshops. So I'm very proud of that. So I want to make sure that these are meaningful to you. So please give us suggestions. Let us know topics that you might want to hear about or use cases, and I'll make it happen. Kim, go ahead.
I'm Kimberly Ortiz. I'm a Senior Program Manager with Microsoft. I've been in the network security space for a long time. It seems like working both inside and outside of government spaces.
Okay.
Sorry, no fun fact, although you can see I don't have any spear guns behind me, but I do have feathers.
Very cool. Okay. Alex, how are you?
Doing well, Ben. Thanks. My name is Alexandria Roland, and I'm a program manager here at Microsoft. So the last couple of years, I've been in cybersecurity, but 9 years in IT overall. Actually started my career in technical recruiting. So I helped folks find jobs in tech. And then I made my way over to helping on EHR training and then became an integration architect for that same company. And then I joined RiskIQ, now Microsoft, a couple of years ago, helping in their pre and post sales engineering side of things. I currently reside in Shawnee, Kansas. And just in terms of hobbies, I love playing tennis, guitar, skiing, boating, and oil painting. So fun facts is I've been all over the world. I actually was born in Paris, France, and then lived in Jakarta, Indonesia for a couple of years, and then Nigeria, Africa. Made my way back to the States when I was about 3 years old. So unfortunately, I don't remember too much, but we do have some cool home videos. Our family does from when we were over there during that time. So it's a little bit about me.
We need to send you to Antarctica so you can knock that off on the bucket list.
Yeah, that and South America. Those are the two that I haven't visited.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be giving out a $100 American Express gift card for a lucky attendee today. So please stay, and towards the end, we'll give out that certificate. Please make sure, Kimberly and Alex, that we leave time to announce who the winner is, so they can have that cool.
Otherwise, we get the gift card.
That's right. I do that all the time, so please don't let that happen today. Okay, so we're going to start off. Barrett, can you start off with some poll questions for us so we can gauge the audience and make sure that we make this to their viewpoint and what they want to see today? Okay, so the first one, have you ever attended a workshop before? And the reason why we ask this is we want to know how specific we can be, or how broad, so we can make the use cases applicable to everyone. So if it's your first time coming, it's no problem. We'll actually, I'll explain things a little bit more detailed, some of the interfaces, things like that. If you've attended before, and everybody has, I'll keep it more of a higher level. Okay, so about 74% yes, and 26% no. So great. So I'll go a little bit wide, but not too much for everyone.
You know what that means, Benjamin? You're going to have to come up with some new jokes.
That's right. Everyone's heard these before. It's true. Okay, the next question. Cybersecurity experience. How long have you been working in cybersecurity? Less than 2 years, 2 to 5 years, more than 5 years, or never? And some of the use cases that we're doing are going to be for people that are more of the SOC analyst, and some are going to be more of the hunting aspect. Okay, so we have 18% less than 2 years, 32% 2 to 5 years, 48% is 5 or more years, and 2% never. So about almost 50-50. Okay, with a lot of experience. Okay, cool. Okay, my organization is most concerned with these types of threats: nation state threats, hacktivists, insider threats, ransomware, espionage, domestic cybercrime, or brand abuse reputation. And generally, it's always one specific one has the most. And if you've attended before, you know kind of what people are thinking. But we want to know where it points to, because that kind of directs me on what type of use cases to try to bring forward to the groups here. Okay, and the winner is ransomware, followed by insider threats, and then a tie for brand abuse, reputation, and nation state, and then domestic cybercrime, hacktivists, and espionage. Okay, very cool. Okay, and the other question is, do you currently use Microsoft Sentinel? And the reason for that is we're showing that today, and I just want to gauge to see if you are, to make sure that then we can tell you about, the RiskIQ add-on you can put in to make all these playbooks happen. So that's why I'm asking. Okay, about 46% yes, and about 54% no. Okay, perfect. And Barrett, is that the last question?
Yeah, that's it. We're ready to go.
Okay, perfect. So let's jump in. So what we're going to be talking about today is how you can extend detections, whether from internal systems and from threat hunting, to allow you to respond to incidents better and quicker. So we're going to be looking at enriching incidents that a SIM might create, and then from that, go out and investigate and gather more information and take that back to do additional action. Or looking at your events that have come into the SIM, for example, and using that to hunt for things that potentially are bad, and then find out who might have done it internally. So typical things that you might be doing inside of any SIM. It doesn't have to be Sentinel, but we're going to be showing Sentinel today. And then the other one I'm going to talk about, and this was these have all happened within the last 5 days. Attack that's been happening against network attached storage and Windows machines where they're trying to wipe the data from those. And then fake UN refugee agency website that got popped up where they were asking for Bitcoin to give to Ukrainians, but it was fake. And so we're going to go through both of those and kind of investigate them. But when we do the NAS attack, that one is going to be, I want you kind of to try to figure out why the Russians would be attacking network attached storage devices and trying to wipe data. And so just think about that. So as we go through, I'm going to ask some questions, and I would like to get some feedback from the audience on those. Okay, so for the people that are new, we're going to quickly go through and talk about RiskIQ and what we do. So RiskIQ, basically, there's two aspects where our data is used. One of them is in threat intelligence, and the other one is in attack surface management. So think of it this way. We scan the entire internet as a virtual user, interacting with the internet as like a person would. And with that, we understand what's installed, what's running, what loads from particular websites, what gets sent to other websites, what components are there. And with that, we have a map of the internet. So we can use that to show yourself. We can show you others that you might rely upon to do business, like a third-party supply chain vendor. Or if we see bad infrastructure, we can tell you, oh, all of this bad infrastructure is involved with this backdoor, this command and control, this threat actor, for example. And so what we're going to be focusing on today is on the threat intelligence side. But some of that threat intelligence might be a global perspective of how many of a certain device are installed around the world. And so we're going to be looking at that type of information to help us in our understanding of a threat, whether it's good or bad or malicious or suspicious, or something that you should be monitoring or something you should be blocking internally in your systems. And we're going to go through those. So when you think about the challenges that we're facing all the time, everyone's going through digital cloud transformation, which means you're doing more and more things online, and you're moving more things from inside of your own owned and controlled infrastructure to more of a shared infrastructure like Google, Microsoft, using third-party applications. And with that transformation, things are going out of your monitoring and control aspect. And so with that, you need to be able to figure out what your threats are. So if you're relying upon a payment card vendor, if they have a problem or they go down, that could affect your business. Or a supply chain, if you're dealing with a particular manufacturer and they get attacked and they're down, that could affect your business as well and your customers. So we're going to show you how you can use this information to determine your risk, your third-party risk, and the global risk to something, to give you precise, direct observations that we have within our data. So then you can use that information to defend against a global scale. And when we talk about that, that means for example, if we know where all the command and control stations are for CobaltStrike, for example, you could take that information and put it in place and say, I'm not going to allow anyone to communicate to those command and controls. So you will inoculate your internal users from that bad infrastructure that's out there. And so those are the type of things that we're going to be discussing and showing in these types of use cases that we have today. Now, when you think about how you're going to modernize your operations or get them up to the highest level of understanding, it's a combination of that attack surface, that external attack surface, and the threat intelligence, and marrying those together. So for example, if you're reading an article and that article talks about a particular operating system or application or appliance, and you have that in your own infrastructure, then that's an article that you should really pay attention to, or that threat intelligence is something that you should make sure you understand, or a third party. So when we go through these things, you're going to see sometimes hits on threat intelligence or articles that somebody has published in the world. It might be RiskIQ, Microsoft, it could be a competitor, but it's threat intelligence that organizations put out to make the world a better place. And we take that information, and we might even have our own analysts look at it and find additional things to look at to give you better understanding. And that will help you understand and marry the attack surface with the threat intelligence to make it pinpoint accurate of where the risk and your priority should be, to be able to find out where your exposures are and fix them. So when you think about security, there's an inside and outside view. And now that we're part of Microsoft, it's a combination of the two. So when you think about like the device perspective, the things that you own and control, those things go in, you have endpoint protection. You have things that are installed internally on those devices to understand if there's malware, if there's any threats directly to that device, what if I want to do a cleanup or disable a machine or isolate it or do something or make sure it's patched before it comes online. You have that ability to understand that, and you can push it out to everybody from your command and control. But there's another side, and that other side organizations generally don't have visibility to or control, but RiskIQ can give you that. And it can be through any vendor. That information can flow and help you with any of your endpoint protection that you're using. So with that, RiskIQ, because we have that single map of the internet and we've graphed all the relationships, we're able to tell you those threats to you, to your third parties, and from threat actors and their tooling. And we can help you then use that to push it out to enhance your internal systems to make those better. So we're marrying the internet and the endpoint together to give you better understanding of the threats that are out there and the risks that are associated with those. So the cool thing is that threat actors can't avoid the internet. We're all playing on the same battlefield. And if we're monitoring that, we're able then to understand what's happening, what they're doing, and who they are. So just from somebody going on the internet, you have an IP address, and that block, an ASN, there's an ISP that you're using. So there's some signals that are being released. Now, when you create an email, you're going to use an email provider. There's going to be a subject, a body, header, attachments. There'll be the time that it was created, maybe even a language that was used to create it in. And then once you send it, it goes through all the transit IPs, the net blocks, the different ASNs they're going through, and the times it's taking to go there. And then when the person receives the email, you can have it with HTML. So then there's information that can be fingerprinted about that person who read it. You'll get a timestamp. You maybe even notification that they actually opened it and they're looking at it right now. You'll know the IP address of the server that was connected, and potentially even that user's IP address, because you can, with HTML, have it run a geolocation to find out what IP address and where they're located to understand that. Now, You can have binaries that execute. There could be some dependencies that are in there from things going in and out of those emails. When they click on it, there could be some redirects. And then once they're compromised, you're going to have an internal IP address. You're going to have that network block, the ASN they're associated with, and any external things that you might do, like lateral movement. You might scan for other things, and there's TTPs associated with that. So these are the type of things that are always happening with these types of attacks. And these signals cannot be avoided because you're on the internet. So you might be able to hide and obfuscate some of your information, but the basic pieces you can find. And what we're going to try to show you in these use cases is how you can leverage this knowledge of these signals. And because we're gathering all the data ourselves, we have that correlated view and context to be able to tell you, these are direct observations that we saw. It's not a feed. It's not, here's a list of all the bad stuff. Like when we tell you something's bad, it's dynamic. It's based upon right now from the data that we have. So every day as we update and bring that new information from last night's scans of the internet, we're able to tell you that new reputation of an IP and a domain, for example, and why. And so it's not like just like a credit score where you get a number, but we're telling you why that score is that way. And so you can understand it might be that we saw something bad there. There was an article written about that domain or IP. It's on infrastructure where we saw other bad stuff. It's using a hosting provider that generally we've seen malicious stuff, or a registrar that registrars a lot of bad stuff. So it could be a lot of stuff. So what happens is the reason why we're able to do this is that we're going out and scanning the entire open internet. We're bringing all that information. We're doing it from a client's perspective. So we have that document object model. So as that page builds, we know what comes in and what goes out. We're also doing passive DNS, and we can't be everywhere. So we have partners also that we share data with, that we get their passive DNS. So if somebody asks for a domain, we know what IP address came back. And you'll see in our interface the different vendors that reported that information. So you can see how good our data is, and then how we're also enhancing with other data as well. We're pulling in all the open source intelligence. We have researchers and threat analysts that go through those as well and add context and additional information from our systems. We're looking at we do active DNS, passive DNS. We also have one of the largest mobile app databases in the world, where we're looking at not only Google and Apple, but all the secondary and mobile app stores around the world, letting people know what's good and what's bad. We pull down the banners. We scan for ports. Social media we look at as well. Who is records? Now, as that comes in, we're doing over 2 billion web requests a day. So with that, it gives us the great understanding to really understand, how the internet is changing on a day-to-day basis. So for example, if you patch, if we scan you the day before, we see the new version the other day. So we can see how long that has been out there. Or if a patch is released, how quickly people are implementing that over time. So we have that capability of understanding that. So the cool thing is that the things that we're doing gives us the capability of rolling back a data set or an understanding to the beginning of time and rolling it forward. So think of like a SIM. I create a rule or an alert, and then from that point forward, it works. It doesn't go back in time and say, hey, go back and figure this out. Most things don't work that way, but we have the capability that every day that we collect data, we merge it with what we had from the day before, which goes back 11 years. So if we figured out after doing an investigation, oh, there was this little bit of code that is contained in the document object model that I could create a new data set, we could go back to the beginning of time and roll that forward and find that data set and then link infrastructure together from threat actors that we didn't know about in the past, but we do now, and then link their old infrastructure with that new infrastructure. So that's something that's really cool. And the reason why we can do that is that our threat researchers work with our data scientists, and when that merge happens, they update that machine learning to be able to do that. And so that's how, for example, cookies was added to RiskIQ, and that was after the Turla satellite malware that was out there, where they would break in to companies and have it communicate to an IP address that was over a satellite connection, and they were pulling data from the sky, and the real organization would block the traffic, but they would set up the same IP on a satellite, and they would receive the information and do their command and control from there. And so they had cookies that were on all of the infected machines, so we're able to find out where they were and the infrastructure of what they were using. So we're able to link that together. So that's how we do things. So we're able to infrastructure chain things together. And you're thinking, well, what does that mean? It means that from a single indicator or thing, like an IP address, a domain, a piece of malware, something, we're able then to say, oh, that malware was associated with this IP. That IP had this certificate. That certificate was also associated with this domain, and that domain had different IPs, and we're able to link it all together to give you that map and say, oh, here's all of the infrastructure that's involved with this particular thing that you started off with. So as we go out to that layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, we can chain these things together, and you can save those like in a project, for example, and take all those indicators and monitor them, or you can export them out or use the API to bring them into another system to do more detections or blocking to help you. So that's kind of how it works. And so when you look at the MITRE attack framework, a lot of the stuff that RiskIQ does is early in the kill chain. So we're doing those active scanning, we're gathering the stuff. So we're acting kind of like that attacker. So you're getting a perspective of how you're being seen from the outside world and where all those holes are and what's happening. So we're able to give you that perspective to fully understand what's happening. So what occurs is that we can take that outside perspective that we have and marry it with an inside perspective. And what we're going to be showing today is how that information is now being leveraged inside of Sentinel to be able to make that smarter, faster, give you more information. So when you talk to threat analysts and you go, well, why did you make this determination? You'll probably hear a lot of them based upon the facts that I had at the time. This was the decision that I could make. Later on, we got more information. When we got that information, yeah, our decision would have changed, but based upon right then and there, this is all we had to go by. So what we're trying to do is give you all that information right away. So we know things about the vulnerabilities. We're always constantly checking and understanding change. We understand the threat infrastructure, and we're able to take this and give you the ability to respond to issues and understand what's happening. Now, for the threat intelligence piece, we have some curated open source threat intelligence, and then we also have ones that have been published by others, but we go through and pull out all the indicators that might be in the images, so you can click on them or download them and use them immediately. We understand, from real observations, this is not from a feed, it's things that we directly have seen. And we're able then to give you that ability to do the advanced hunting and bring that information in to your organization and use it, whether in a notebook, whether in a SIM, whether directly in the UI or via API, to be able to fully understand the risk and exposure to your organization. So with that, we're going to now get into the labs and do our things today. So Alex, can you copy the username and password and put it into the chat for everybody?
Yep, I'll grab that.
Okay, so today we're going to be using a shared credential. And the reason why we're doing a shared credential and not a promo code today is that we might get into some areas where we're going to look at attack surfaces. And I want to make sure that everyone's looking at the same attack surfaces. So ctw@threattracking.com. and the password is case sensitive RiskIQ with a capital R at 2022. Okay. Now, we're going to be using RiskIQ Illuminate, and we're also going to, I'm going to show you a screenshot. So I'm going to use URLScan.io to show you that screenshot. And then Kimberly is going to use our lab to show you how that Sentinel piece works. I'm trying to see what we can do in the future to have a lab environment where we can actually have you go in and click on things and do stuff. But we're still in the process of standing up our lab. And so we're going to figure that in the coming months. But that's eventually what I'm going to get to, is that we'll log in and everyone will have their own Sentinel and different things, and we can run through scenarios. And I'm trying to get some real research and attacks and marry those together to say, oh, we just read about this attack. Let's go and examine it in different products and see what happens, and see when we could have detected it and when can we stop it. And so that's in the future. That's where we're building towards. Now, I want to give everyone the disclaimer. And the disclaimer is that the lawyers rule the world, and what we're investigating are real threats, real bad things. Don't go to these IP addresses. Don't go to these domains directly. You want to use a tool, an air gap between you and what we're investigating, first of all, so the person or the group doesn't know that you're investigating them. And second, to protect yourself and your organization from malware. Now, I'm very cautious in what I do. But one of the things that I found out was when I created my slides, there was a QR code that was associated with a Bitcoin address. And when I put it on my slide and I saved it to my OneDrive, it got flagged of having malware in it. And Alex found out which one it was, and we talked about it yesterday. It was kind of funny. So even though I was really safe and I didn't visit something, because I had that link to something that was bad, Defender picked it up and blocked it and wouldn't let me share it with anybody. And I had to remove it and crop the image. So then the QR code wasn't seen. So we're going to go through and we're going to do that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to Kimberly. And Kimberly's going to kick us off with the Sentinel use cases that we're going to do today. And I'm going to stop sharing, Kimberly, and you can share.
All right.
Okay? Give me a quick second, and I'm stopping.
Okay. Share screen. Let's rearrange my window. So everybody should be looking at my Sentinel demo environment here.
And one thing I want to mention before you start, you're going to get a copy of the slides that we have, and I have screenshots from what Kimberly's going to be showing, so that's in the slides as well. Also, every URL that I'm going to be going to will also be given out, and we're going to have a recording of this so you can watch it again or give it to friends or colleagues to watch.
Perfect. So Benjamin, can you confirm, because I don't have a red box around my screen. Are you seeing Sentinel?
I see your screen. I see your Sentinel screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the scenario that I'm going to walk through is designed to resonate with SOC analysts who are using Sentinel as their SIM. What I want to do is highlight how data from RiskIQ can be leveraged to, number one, prioritize your incidents for triage. So what we want to do is get the most important things to the top of your queue for you to investigate. And then secondly, once you're actually investigating a particular incident, we want to give you the data that you need to make decisions more quickly and remediate that incident as quickly as possible. So the background on this first scenario is that we're emulating a real world situation where threat actors took advantage of a vulnerability in an IT management software platform created by the vendor Kaseya in order to spread ransomware. So then after that occurred, someone used this as an opportunity for a Malspam campaign. So they were sending emails with attachments named securityupdates.exe, trying to make it look like it came from Microsoft in order to encourage users to patch the Kaseya vulnerability. But what was really going on was that this actor was actually delivering a CobaltStrike payload disguised as the update. So we know that CobaltStrike is threat emulation software meant for pen testers, but sometimes used by actors with malicious intentions, right? So the purpose of this demo is to not really get into the details of how an analytic was written to generate the detection, but rather we want to show you how for a given incident, we're able to extract entities such as IP addresses or domain names from the incident. And from there, we're going to go out and collect the external telemetry on those indicators. So that's the data that's offered by RiskIQ Illuminate. And then we're going to use that data to triage the incidents more quickly.
Can I say something, Kim, real quick?
Yeah.
So this is like, for example, you're in the SOC and you need to know, something comes in and you're the first level analyst and you need to be able to make a determination. Hey, is this okay? Or is this bad? Or do I need to send this on to the next level of triage or remediation that somebody might need to do? So we're going to show you a manual way to do it, but this can also be automated, that these things can happen automatically, that when you get into the incident, it's already done for yourself. So just bear that in mind, is that we're going to show you the manual way that this works, but then this can be fully automated where as these things come in, they're automatically enriched, automatically something happens with it. But we're going to show you the manual way first,
Yep.
So we can ask questions and we can explain it.
Okay, so you can see over here that I am in my demo workspace in Sentinel, right? This isn't a real network. This is something that we put together in order to support the scenarios. And before I actually get going, I'm going to show you where you can find RiskIQ playbooks to install in your own workspace. So if I click right here on Content Hub, and just a quick note with this, when you see the preview designation next to anything, that just means that there's additional terms surrounding the feature, but basically it's provided as is and maybe subject to change, but that doesn't matter for now. I'm going to go ahead and search for the RiskIQ solution. And so we can click on this and we can see the description come up here. And basically this is just showing you, this is where you would go and install 27 different playbooks that we've put together. So if you're not familiar with the playbook, this is basically a collection of remediation activities that can be run as a routine in Sentinel to help automate and orchestrate your threat response. So we could really spend a lot of time talking about the different things that you can do with playbooks. But for our purposes, we're going to use these to access data provided from the different Illuminate API endpoints and populate that data directly into our incidents. So you see, I already have these installed. I'm going to hop over here to my incidents page. And what we're looking at here in the middle of my screen is a list of incidents sorted by the most recently created. We're looking at incidents that were generated over the course of the last 24 hours. In theory, kind of giving you an environment that reflects the realities of an enterprise environment, and that there are a lot of incidents listed in here, right? We have a variety of filters across the top of the screen. I can come over here and I can search for specific incidents by name. Let me expand this out a little bit. I can select to only be viewing incidents that are labeled with a specified severity, or I can sort by status, etc. up here. If I go ahead and just select one of these, I'm going to have this incident details pane populate on the right side of the screen. But what I really want to do is show you how, like Benjamin said, we're generating incidents both with and without the RiskIQ playbooks automatically run on them. So you can kind of see the difference there. So let's go grab my first one. Let's close this up. So I looked for all incidents that have the word Kaseya in them, because that's what I called the rule that I created. And you can just see really quickly at a high level that I have incidents that are categorized at a high severity and some that are at a medium severity. And if you look over here at the names, you see that the medium ones, for the most part, correlate with things that have not had any playbooks run on them yet. And then high, they already had the playbooks run.
So we're going to do a medium one so people can see how those playbooks work and what data comes in. But the other one is the automated way where the playbook is already run on that incident.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do, because this is a demo environment and I don't know who else is in here right now playing around with this, I'm going to grab this incident that hasn't had playbooks run, and I'm going to go ahead and assign it to myself so that anybody who's looking knows, okay, don't mess with this, hopefully. And now I'm going to go ahead and go down and view full details on this incident. So understand here that we're looking at an incident that has not been triaged in any way, right? Here on this alerts tab in Sentinel, it's possible to create roles that roll multiple alerts up under a single incident. What I'm demonstrating right here is just showing a one-to-one mapping between this alert that hit and my incident. So just keep in mind that that might not always be the case. You might see a list of alerts here down under your one incident. Clicking over here to the Entities tab, this will list what are potentially indicators that were extracted from the incident. At this point, you don't really have a lot of context around them, but at least here you can see the types of entities that we're potentially going to extract. And then hopping over here to the Comments tab, this is where, as an analyst, you can go in and add notes to your incident. What we're going to do is take advantage of this field to hold the enrichment information that we're about to pull in for certain ones of these extracted entities. Over here on the details pane, like I said before, the overall severity of the incident is currently set at medium. Down here, something else to note is that no tags have been added to this incident yet. So I'm going to go ahead and hop back over to alerts, and we'll get running with these playbooks. So here to the right is where I would go and view the ones that I have installed. I'm going to go ahead and filter this view down a little bit so that we're only looking at the RiskIQ playbooks. And so here's our list. I'm not going to walk through every single one, but do know that broadly speaking, our playbooks are grouped into 3 different categories. So we have this automated triage playbook, which I'm going to demonstrate here in a second. And then we also have playbooks that retrieve raw data enrichment for an indicator. And then we have another set of playbooks that are more focused on intelligence gathering. So these would be the ones that pull in things like reputation data or references to OSINT articles from them. So let me go ahead and get started. Let me make sure I run the right playbooks. I have a few favorites that I always recommend starting out with. So we're definitely going to run this automated triage playbook. Let's see here. We're going to do data summary. And we're going to do intel summary on domains and IP addresses. Let's see, here's domains, and here are the IP addresses. Okay, so typically these might take a few seconds to run. I can go over to this runs tab and then click on refresh to see what's going on with my playbooks. This will let me know when they've completed, and it'll also hopefully let me know, okay, 3 of them succeeded and 1 failed. And that would be because I actually clicked on the wrong playbook. I don't have that one set up. So let me go back here and grab the correct one. I was looking for Intel Summary IP. So the reason that the reputation one I don't care about is because reputation is included in alert triage. So it really isn't necessary to run this in addition to this. So let's click the right one, Intel Summary IP.
I like how it turns gray once you clicked on it. So you didn't. So if you're doing a bunch, you can tell.
Actually, Benjamin, it's gray because I have this one disabled.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Let's come back over here. Refresh this, and hopefully we'll see a new succeeded playbook.
Yep.
Here we go. Awesome. Okay, so once you've verified that your playbooks have run successfully, I'm going to go ahead and X out of this screen, and this is going to bring me back to my incident page. Once I'm here, I'm going to have to refresh the incident again so that all the changes that occurred are populated here for me to see.
I see 6 comments now.
Awesome. That's what we were hoping for.
Okay.
Okay, so everything that changed besides the comments, you'll notice that the incident severity got bumped up to high. Previously, it was medium. Down here, we have a new tag added to the incident. So it's RiskIQ malicious here now. To really understand, though, why these changes occurred, we do have to hop into these comments. So let's take a look here. Over here on the left, again, you can see the entities that were extracted, and these are what are going to drive the queries that were issued in order to pull in these comments. So if it's a host or an IP address entity type, we're going to be able to pull back enrichment data on it. And if you're super eagle-eyed, you might be looking at these thinking that the indicators maybe look a little weird, like especially this notify-epay indicator right here. So what we're doing is we are mapping domains to the host entity type within the analytic rule, since Sentinel does not yet have a DNS entity type. And then within our playbooks, we're modifying them to make sure that they take care of making sure the domain is correctly formatted when we send it to our API endpoints.
So this is like when you go look at your files and it doesn't have a .doc at the end, it's hidden. It's kind of the same thing that we're seeing here, where it's not the fully qualified name, it's shortened, but the data is in the back end or behind the scenes, and we're using that to run the playbook and get the data.
Exactly. So you see notify-epay as this host over here. But if you look over here, you can see that we did a query for notify-epay.com, which is what was actually in the incident.
Cool.
So let's take a look at the output here from these. Okay, first we'll take a look. So these two here, this is the output from our Intel summary playbooks. So we had one specifically for the IP address and one specifically for this domain. And by looking at this, we can kind of quickly assess that there's some sort of link between these two indicators to an attack that must somehow involve the software vendor Kaseya. So I'm going to come back to these article links in a minute.
And it's also, so we can see it's related to CobaltStrike and Revil as well, attacker. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep. All right, scrolling down here, the next two comment blocks are associated with our data summary playbooks. So these just provide links to our traditional RiskIQ Illuminate data sets so that you can go in and do your additional investigation. Notice that we have the counts here included, so you're not wasting time drilling into data sets that aren't actually available. Like there's no cookies associated with this IP address, so you don't need to bother, excuse me, bother with that.
So this is like if you looked at all the different tabs inside the UI, this is the link directly to those areas.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then last but not least, my favorite playbook and the one that I always recommend everybody kind of start out with is this automated triage playbook. So what this did was it took the extracted entities and it sent them to our reputation service. And because a malicious reputation score returned for at least one, and in this case, actually both of our indicators, then this led to the severity of the incident getting bumped up to malicious, and then also the addition of that tag that I pointed out earlier.
So this is like, so this is what would be in the automated one from the list before. So if you had these set up to always run on these, then this data would just be in there and the severity would have been automatically updated. That's why we saw the medium severity and the high severity Kaseya incidents, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. So like looking at kind of some of the criteria here that feeds into these reputation scores, I really like this. So it's not just a black box. We're not just like spitting out a score to you and saying, hey, you know, just trust us. You can go back and kind of check into these and see what's going on. Like this one, this IP address was observed on a blacklist that documents entities that they've observed malware on.
So these are the rules of why we're saying this is bad. So like, remember I mentioned about like having a credit score. This is like your risk score for this domain and the reasoning behind it. And the reason behind it is, hey, that IP address was in this research that said it was bad. And then the name server is more likely to have malicious infrastructure. And there was one more. So there's three parts to that rule that said why it's high severity. And the two articles that's related to are one about a particular ransomware with Kaseya and the other one dropping CobaltStrike. Okay.
All right. So now that we have all these comments populated, I really have multiple kind of jumping off points, right, to continue with my investigation. I would probably always recommend, well, personally, I would recommend starting with the threat intel articles, right? because obviously there's somebody there who's already done some research. Hopefully there's some good tidbits in there that we can pull out and apply to our own environment. So I'm going to go ahead and open up. I'm going to look at this fake Kaseya VSA security updates drops CobaltStrike article. And this is going to give you more information on kind of what I was describing at the very beginning of the scenario, what we're looking at. Right here, we are in our threat intelligence portal. In the middle here, I have a description of what was going on, and I have a link to the original article that we pulled in. And I think it's always super important to go back to the source to really understand the details of what was observed. If this article, if I were to drill into it, it's actually documenting tweets that were put out by Malwarebytes threat intelligence team. So they're publishing what they saw. And what you're really going to want to do is compare their analysis with what you are seeing on your own network.
So
RiskIQ.
one thing I want to ask you is I see public indicators and RiskIQ indicators. And what are the differences?
Reading my mind.
What does that mean? Like if I was an end user, what would that mean?
So we're trying to help you out. We go ahead and in advance, extract any indicators that were identified within this article. So we'll grab them out of the text. We'll take a look at the images. We'll do some OCR. We'll verify that the correct indicators were extracted, and we'll list those out as public indicators for you. So this IP address should look familiar. This is what we originally saw back in our incident that we were looking at in Sentinel. But then also I have these other indicators that I could use for threat hunting potentially as well. And then the RiskIQ indicators, these are ones that our own research team went in, and after taking a look at the article, just based on the volume of collection that we have and the data that maybe the original researchers didn't have access to, we were able to go in and identify these extra indicators that are related to this campaign, and therefore, you know, additional fodder for you to go in and do your threat hunting, right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drill in on this IP address and open it up in our classic interface. So let's make sure I do this correctly. Like Benjamin was mentioning earlier, all these data sets across the top, you take a look at the number of counts that we have for each one. And if you were to go back and compare this to what was written to our comments, these numbers should match up. And each of these links would just dump you directly into that tab. What I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to go ahead and drill in on this Microsoft tab. So we have the ability to set up an integration from within Illuminate that would allow us for selected indicators to send them over to the threat intelligence section of Sentinel. So here I am, I'm looking at this IP address. I could click down here on this create alert button to send that indicator over. But it turns out I don't actually have to do it because I've already done it. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back into Sentinel. I'm going to X out of this incident. And then I'm going to head over here to threat intelligence. And if you look closely, it's actually in there twice. You can see where that IP address is now listed and included in my custom threat intel. And once it's here, I can see a count of the number of times this indicator has been observed as an entity extracted from a system alert, right? So what I would need to do next is to make sure that I have analytic rules running, which will compare all the indicators in my threat intelligence list with the connected data sources that I specify, so that going forward from now, at least for the timeframes that I have set, I'm alerted to observations of this indicator within my network traffic.
So if I went through the article and I clicked on all those IPs and domains, I could add an alert for those things to say, let me know if anybody else is communicating to any of those bad things.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So that kind of wraps up my first scenario. Going back here to the incidents tab, like hopefully you can see how scheduling these playbooks to run automatically is going to lead you to surfacing these higher priority incidents for investigation to the top of your queue. So you can just boom, boom.
So if you didn't have these things running, what you would be doing is somebody would manually take that IP or domain, go into the RiskIQ interface and search on it and see what came up. And then you'd be doing copy and pasting, putting it back into your comments, and then manually going through and updating the severity and the tags to say, hey, it's malicious and it's high severity. So this is a way for you to have somebody at a lesser level in the organization function at a higher level, because you can have the analyst, who's the second level, or the person that does the hunting, create these types of things or implement these things in order for them to be smarter and have that higher level fidelity of understanding of what the true risk is to something, and then be able to either remediate or escalate it to the next level.
Yep.
Okay, very cool. So this is based upon an incident. So the next one that you're going to be doing, do you want to show your slide for a second and just show it? This is going to be hunting aspects. So this is more of like an advanced use case inside of Sentinel where you're going to be hunting. And are there any questions that have come in, Alex, that we need to address? Or have you got them already done in chat?
I'm working on them. So to your question, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, but Quachiro, basically with the public indicators that we get, those are already coming from other open source providers that our research team has vetted to make sure that those are relevant and actionable, that security professionals would want to know about. The RiskIQ indicators are the ones that we're finding in addition to that. So with all the data sets that Benjamin went over before, oftentimes we've got a bigger picture so we can scrape out additional related IOCs, and that's what those RiskIQ ones are. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so let me put it another way. So think of it this way: because of that infrastructure chain that we know about, when we take those indicators and we look at them ourselves, we might see other infrastructure that's associated with that bad stuff. So we'll be able to say, oh, that IP is also on this domain, and that domain is also has this certificate, that certificate's on another IP. So we can link it together. So that we have threat analysts that actually, and researchers that actually look at those and will say, hey, let me look at that, what those said. Are there anything else that we need to add? And they will add those in there, and those are the RiskIQ indicators. So so instead of starting off and you putting in those things and doing them in RiskIQ to find those, we're giving you more information, so you're like further down the investigation path. So think of it, instead of like what we found out is when we talk with analysts, a lot of them were taking open source articles, taking those indicators and searching them in RiskIQ to find more infrastructure, so then they can use that to protect their organization. So what we wanted to do was to make it where we're doing a lot of that work for you. So when that article is published, we're adding those additional indicators and taking you further down that path of that investigation when you first start off. So we're going to save you probably 45 minutes to an hour for each one of those articles, because we've already gathered more information for you. Okay. So Kim, do you want me to show the slide for a second, or?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay.
Because I think you're better prepared than I am.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen for a second. And share. And I'm going to share my slide. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're going to be doing is talking about threat hunting. So threat hunting means you're going to go look at something that you have, and you're going to see if there's anything bad with it. And what we're going to look at is DNS logs. And DNS logs can tell you a lot of stuff, but they can also be very noisy. And those noisy logs, some people might not want to spend the effort to go through and do something with them, because you're trying to find that needle in the haystack. And so what we're going to show you is some ways that you can take those large amount of logs and do something with them to find them meaningful and to find those threats you might not know that are in the early stages or have just happened. Okay, so we're going to look at a security analyst that's doing some hunting queries inside of Sentinel to identify suspicious TLDs. So this is like the XYZ, the .su, those types of TLDs that are might be very inexpensive or free to set up, where the threat actors will constantly be using these to perform attacks from. So we're going to go look at those in the organization to see, do I have any of those? But once you have those, some might be legitimate. So what we're going to do is we're going to then run some playbooks on them to figure out if they're good or bad. And then we'll do some investigations. Is that right?
Sounds good.
Is that did I summarize it correctly or no?
Yeah, and my dog is losing her mind in the background, so hopefully you didn't hear that. And I got distracted.
It's fine. So people know it's live. So this is
Right,
nothing's hidden. So my dog usually goes to the fence, my two dogs, and yell at the cat that owns the neighborhood. It's always good to have a dog on the call.
All right, so we should be looking at my Sentinel screen again. Okay, perfect. So like Benjamin just described, this scenario is designed to mimic kind of a simplified threat hunting scenario. I'm going to start by showing you where you can find pre-canned queries to work with, and then turn those into incidents that you can enrich with the Illuminate data via the playbooks, kind of similar to what we just did. So back on the Sentinel page, I'm going to go ahead and click into hunting. This is where you'll find those queries. These are developed by Microsoft security researchers, added on a continuous basis, with the idea of giving you an entry point to look for new detections and figure out, where to start hunting for the beginnings of new attacks. So the one I'm going to take a look at today is this one, DNS lookups for commonly abused TLDs. So frequently, security researchers will point to work that indicates that certain top-level domains are more likely to be utilized in conjunction with sites stood up for malicious purposes. So reasons for this might be like lower registration costs or just an easier registration process, et cetera. So I'm going to go ahead and start here with this query that was populated over here on the right. What I can do is come down here and just click on this Run Query button. And if I give it just a minute, we see very quickly that there were not any results for this. So what I want to do is maybe I want to modify this query a little bit. Maybe I want to, examine exactly what it is it's trying to do. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click on View Results. And this is going to pop me into my logs page. So here in the middle, I have a Custo query. And Custo query language is the language that's used to query the log data in your workspace. So if you look over here on the left, you can see the different tables and the different fields that I have available to query against. I can run these. I can save anything that I find useful. I know this one didn't return results, but let's say that I know of other abused TLDs that I might want to include in this predefined list. So I'm going to go ahead and modify this, and I'm going to add the SU TLD to my query.
I've seen, I can't tell you how many bad sites I've found with a .su. Crazy.
So one thing too that I want to do is kind of acknowledge that depending on the size of your organization, in a real enterprise environment, this query is likely to bring back way more results than you would actually be able to hunt through. But this is where you work to kind of better refine this. Maybe you only focus on a subset of your systems, don't look at like the guest Wi-Fi network. Maybe you apply some other exclusion criteria. But basically, once you have something whittled down to a more manageable number, like I have one result here, maybe teed up that way intentionally, but you might want to decide that you want to go ahead and create an analytic rule to run this query on a regular basis. So
and you might query these to run in the nighttime when there's not a lot of usage to run these types of queries to do like what happened over the last 2 weeks or the last week or 48 hours or some sort of query to give you that data and then to automatically give you the reputation for them, for example. Yeah,
exactly. So to do that from here, what you would do is go up to this new analytic rule dropdown, and then I would go ahead and say, create Azure Sentinel alert. And this is going to pop me into the wizard where I actually define the criteria for running my rule, like when I want it to run, how I want incidents to be generated from it. I'm not actually going to do this because I, of course, have already set it up for you. So let's go ahead and back out of here. Okay. And then really quickly, if I come down here to analytics, I can show you where those rules are. I'm going to filter by, it's named DNS, I think lookup. Yeah. So I have two rules, DNS lookups for commonly abused TLDs. I have one set to automatically run the playbooks with it. I have another one that does not have playbooks run on it. And the default severity for this analytic is going to be medium. So I'm going to show you again, ways to potentially get that bumped up to something that is more important to look at first.
Okay. So it might be a medium just because it's one of those TLDs, but then if you know something bad about it, you'll bump up the severity.
Like maybe we pull some additional information in that lets us know, oh, okay. So let's go back and look at our incidents page.
So that runs on a scheduled basis to give you those incidents. So it takes all those things that gather during that time, and then it creates an incident out of them.
Yep, like this one, I think I have set to run every 4 hours or so, something like that. So let's narrow down. So I'm only looking at hits from those roles. Expand this out a little bit. Let's get rid of this window. Again, we're seeing anything that was triggered in the last 24 hours because that's how I have my filter set up here. I have a mix of medium and high scoring incidents in here. So let me go ahead and just grab one where we have not run any playbooks against it yet. Again, I'm going to assign this to myself. And then I'm going to click to view full incident details. Hopping over to my alerts tab, view playbooks, filter this down to the RiskIQ ones. Something else you might be wondering, because I showed you at the beginning how the solution set includes 27 different playbooks, but you'll notice that there are not 27 listed here. And that's because this set of playbooks is designed to only run against alerts. We have another set of playbooks that essentially do the same thing, but they'll run against incidents. And since I'm just looking at an alert right now, I just selected that single alert from my alerts tab. I'm only seeing the playbooks that are relevant to that.
Okay.
Let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to do triage again. Let's run that. To mix this up a little, let's throw in some WHOIS data. Do this one. And then let's do data summary again. Okay, hopefully I clicked on all the correct ones. I'm going to pivot over to my runs tab. I'm going to refresh the screen and I'm going to cross my fingers. And boom, we have all three playbooks successfully ran. Okay, so now I'm going to back out to my incident. I'm going to click on refresh here. And you can see, same story. My severity was bumped up to high. I have the RiskIQ malicious tag added here. And I can see that I've had 3 comments populated. Again, here on the left, we can see the list of entities extracted from the incident. In this case, only one entity. And I can verify again that even though it looks like we extracted a hostname account hackers, the playbook was set up to take care of making sure that was formatted correctly before we sent it over to our API endpoints. So looking over here, I have accounthackers.su, which was what I would expect based on the query that we wrote earlier. Okay, so let's take a look at the different data sets that came back from our playbooks. Again, it was this triage playbook that factored into bumping up our score to malicious and adding the tag here. You can see that we pulled back reputation data for accounthackers.su. It's classified as malicious. And the interesting thing here is that we do have a link to another RiskIQ threat intelligence article. So I'm definitely going to want to check this out.
And it says bulletproof hosting. What does that mean?
Oh, we'll get into that.
Okay. Okay.
Next, we have the results from the WHOIS data that returned. So if it ends up playing out that we do have some malicious activity on our network, this can potentially give us some insight into the specific TTPs that this threat actor might use. So like specifically, I can see here that this domain is registered with a Russian registrar. This is just something that I might file away for reference down the road, maybe if I'm building out a profile of my actor or something of that nature. Okay, let's go ahead.
You're living in the Ukraine, and
Exactly, that's what you don't want to see. Okay, let's open up this article down here. Benjamin wants to know about bulletproof hosting, so we have to help him out. Okay, so this is an article that actually documents original RiskIQ research. What they're doing here is taking a look at bulletproof hosting. I believe this is one of a series of articles, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, and with that, we've added to it over time as well.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a reference to hosting providers that kind of shield their customers and their web content and servers from takedown requests. So basically, they're acting as a safe harbor for questionable or illicit types of activities. As a threat,
you usually pay with Bitcoin as well.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They're not gonna, as long as they get their money, they're going to
They'll do whatever you want.
they'll keep your stuff up, and then they'll make sure that it won't get denial of service, and
right.
It's pretty bad stuff. But they're in countries where they're not going to care about hosting content that might be used for malicious activity.
Yep. So as a threat hunter, what I'm going to want to do is review this whole article and just see if there are any TTPs described that I can take back to Sentinel and hunt for, or also maybe just based on reading this, I might decide that it's appropriate to just block all communications with IP addresses in this ASN from communicating with devices on my network. It all depends on kind of your organizational policies. Of course, I'm going to want to go back and identify the host on my network that issued the DNS requests that our query found. And I'm going to want to see if there were any additional communications that followed that. Like, was there a suspicious file download? Was there any other odd activities such as alerts that were maybe triggered around the same time on that endpoint? So I'm going to go in and do that investigation here. But while
this could be like you had DLP, you might have other things set up where you're going to have other information so that you can gather all those pieces and put them together in your incident.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While I was looking at this article, one thing I saw was that there's a reference to a couple name servers that are identified as servicing malware command and control domains and providing fastflux DNS to botnets. So let me I already had the search in here. So that was this section right here. And then I saw that there was a list of name servers to look at. So now I've got this kind of nugget in my head. I'm going to go back to Sentinel and I'm going to take a look at the data that I pulled in from my playbook runs, right? And one of those was this whois data. So I know that it even tells me right here, if I want to see like historic whois records, because right here I see these name servers, okay, it's cloud failure. Those weren't included in the article, but maybe, earlier in history, something from the article was linked to this domain. So let's open this up. And over here on the left is where you can look at older whois records. And I happen to know that at the end of last year, we have this record here where we're pointing to these two name servers that look familiar, right, from the threat intelligence article. So what I want to do now is just kind of showcase, pivoting and the infrastructure chaining that Benjamin was describing earlier. So if I go ahead and open up this link, what I'm going to see is a list of domains that at some point in time have also pointed to this name server. Based on reading the article, we know this is associated with maliciousness. To me, the fact that there are only 63 domains that have ever pointed to this, make it a little, I don't know, maybe shady in my mind, because that's not very many, right? I can see this one domain right here was only recently registered. So let's say I want to go in and take a look at this guy too. Oops, new tab. So I'm looking at this domain cbdstore.online. So let's say, I just want to add this to my research that I'm doing over in Sentinel. I want to take this. I want to say it's potentially a threat intelligence indicator. I'm going to go over to the Microsoft tab. And then what I'm going to do is click on this button that says create alert in order to send that back over to my instance. So let's take a look. I've actually already done this, so I'm not going to go ahead and create the alert here. Back in Sentinel, I'm going to X out on my incident. I'm going to head back over to my threat intelligence section. Let's close this up for a second. And then you can see here where I created this indicator in my custom threat intelligence. And luckily, it has not triggered any alerts to this point. Something else you might want to do while you're working on your investigation, you can come over here and I could add some tags to this based on the article I was reading. And I know, oh, this is potentially now associated with I don't know, I could add botnet to it. I could add fast flux, etc.
Yeah.
It's just a way to organize your investigation, right?
Very cool. This is awesome.
Apply. Whoops. Okay. I don't know why we can only see one. Maybe I didn't hit enter correctly on the first one, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah. This is amazing. Yeah.
I would just want to ensure that from here on out that I've got those analytic rules set up that will make sure that anything I have added to my custom threat intel is going to be queried against the specific data sources that I specify. And then potentially in the future, generate new alerts for me and incidents for me to go in and do my investigation on. So this kind of wraps up, an example threat hunting scenario where I'm really just trying to illustrate how you can use these predefined queries that we're already building out for you in conjunction with the existing threat intel that you can read about, within Illuminate in order to identify threats that are specifically relevant to your network.
Amazing. Very good. Great job.
All right. Do we have any follow-up questions on that? I know I kind of clicked through really fast.
Alex, are we okay?
No, we're good. I've been answering all the questions.
Awesome.
Perfect. So then
Yeah.
we'll get into the hands-on section now. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And we're going to now get into the hands-on part. Okay. So I wanted to do something that was talking about what we're seeing in Ukraine and the cyber attacks that are currently happening there, because everyone knows that before war, there's always some cyber attacks that happen that try to disrupt or take down command and control. So then the people that are being attacked don't know what's happening. Okay, so I saw something that was really, really weird. I'm going, why would network attached storage be attacked prior to an invasion? Well, what's the big deal with that? But if you think about it, and I asked you all to think about this. So when you go to war with a superpower, they're going to destroy all of the infrastructure, the communication infrastructure, so then people can't communicate. So you need to come up with a way that if your infrastructure was destroyed, your phones, your telephone, your telephones, your internet, your television have been knocked out. How are you going to communicate? You're going to have some sort of decentralized way to communicate. And you're going to need some way to send and receive intelligence to the outside world and receive it from the outside world and to your troops in a way that the people that you're at war against can't find where you are. So when I started thinking about the NAS, I have one. I have a Synology. So I've had one for years and used them for my entire career. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to see, well, I have my Synology where it goes out to Google and to Microsoft, and I back up all of my kids' homework. I back up their machines. I back up our photos. I might even connect with work and have a folder synchronized down, so I have that data here with me. and also for my computer, back up and send to the cloud as well, too, to synchronize it and have it all linked together. So if you think about it, if I have a NAS device, I can have a cloud file share. It could be on any of the providers, and I can tell my NAS to synchronize that, to pull things down and put things up. So if I was working with NATO or the US government, I could say, go put your satellite picture there. Give me your intel report there. And it can come down to my NAS. I can tell my NAS to synchronize it with another folder or synchronize it with another NAS device. So I can decentralize it. So if you blow up my data center, it doesn't really matter because this NAS device has a little server in it and it can do these synchronizations, but it also has software in it. It's a server on its own. It can be on a spinning disk or on a disk that's like a flash drive. So they're can be really small. So it's a way to create private communication that's decentralized as long as you have internet, okay, or local network running. But in order to communicate with the outside world, you need to have some sort of internet connection. So when you look at these, they can be small. So I saw that in the article, they were attacking QNAP and Synology. So that could be something you can put in your pocket or your bug out bag, for example. I got it because I wanted to have all our photos and documents and everything backed up. So I have a way that if there was ever a disaster, I can take that Synology with me and I have everything. So if the computers are left behind, it's no big deal. I have that data and it's all backed up, and I can even mirror it to a cloud and have it backed up there as well and have it in multiple places. Now, when you look at these different types of devices, I went into my Synology and said, hey, what type of services run inside of these devices? And I noticed that I have cloud sync, I have a way to download, I can copy a USB drive. So if I had a soldier that had information, he can plug it into the Synology and it would copy up and go everywhere, or I can download data to those. I can also look at chat. I can have private chat communication going between these Synologies as well. I can also have surveillance. So if I have IP cameras, I can have them start synchronizing this data and moving around to see IP cameras information, to see movement or different things. So it's pretty incredible what you can do with this. But there's a drawback. And the drawback is this. I'm gonna go into my I'm gonna bring up my live view. So if you take a look at this, the drawback is this, that when you're at war, they're gonna come and blow up your infrastructure. So they just blew up the communications and they blew up the television broadcasting. So that's probably the internet and television gone, blown up. So if that's the case and that's no longer there, you need a method to now get to the internet. So if you can't rely upon the physical infrastructure, how are you going to do it? Well, you're going to turn to Elon Musk and say, please, can I have some of your Starlink terminals, which can be anywhere, and have high-speed internet that now I can plug my Synologies in or my little QNAPs and have it send all the data around and have up-to-date, real, direct information from the outside into the field and give this out. So I didn't even think about this when I first saw it, but then when I started thinking about it, it's a complete decentralized way of communicating. And that's why it was attacked. So what we want to do is I want to go through and bring up some of these articles and we'll review them and then we'll see how big this is. Now, the one thing you have to think about is that if you want to protect these types of devices, they generally aren't directly on the internet. Because they're on the internet, they can be attacked. If there's an issue with the firmware or the software, somebody can get in and wipe them out. They could encrypt them. There's a lot of stuff that can happen. And that's what we've been seeing now with the Russian attack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy an article. I'm going to copy all of them real quick because there's not that many. And I'm going to paste those into the chat. So give me a quick second. I have another screen going real fast where I am going to bring those up and chat with everyone. And I'm going to paste those in. Okay. So you should be able to click on them and do them. So the first one is this article. Okay. And when I read this article, I was like, okay, they're wiping out servers in the Ukraine. They're going in and erasing them. But then when I noticed and I read the other articles that were linked in here, they were going after the network attached storage. So what I want to do is I want to look at these articles. So I opened up the articles and you can see disk wiping attacks precede Russian invasion. And that's when when I looked at this, I go, why would they do that? It's because they're trying to take out this decentralized way of communicating and getting data. They're trying to eliminate it. So now they wouldn't work. So once they've been bricked and they've been erased, that device is no longer good. You need a new device in order to get around it. And they're also wiping out Windows devices because a Windows device could do the same thing. So they were also attacking those as well. So once it's on the internet, and if it doesn't have a method of protecting that endpoint, it can be wiped as well. And when I looked at this, it showed all of the different firmwares of different ones that were being wiped. And so I wanted to go through and look at these, and they're recommending to hide your NAS. You don't have it out there. I know like Synology has a thing where if you log in too many times, it fails login, it just blocks that IP. So it won't allow you to connect from that IP address again. So there's some things that you can implement, but you generally want to have a VPN where you're going to go in and then you have access to it. But I understand, like if you're in time of war and you need to just get the data, you might need to do that. So we're going to go through and look at these. So the QNAP, one of the articles was explaining that, hey, they're using this thing Deadbolt to go in and ransomware these devices. And some are legitimate that if you pay the ransomware, they'll decrypt, you get the decryption key. Other ones aren't. So like right now, if this is coming from Russia, for example, you're going to get your data back right now because they're at war. They don't really care. They're just trying to brick these things. So when we go through and look at this, the first IP address that was listed in the article was this one. And I'm going to paste this one in so you can just see it. And if we go here and we look at this IP address, you can understand, hey, it's in the Ukraine, okay? And you can see that there was some DNS entries associated with this IP address. But if we look at the components, because we're going out there and fingerprinting the internet as we're seeing these devices and stuff, you can see that there was this QNAP station FTP. So you can send and receive unencrypted files to one of these. So one way to find these types of things, I'm going to show you like a method to see how many are in the world. So we're not focusing, I don't want to like go in and focus on what's just in the Ukraine or this. I'm going to just show you how to look at and cast the biggest net possible to find these things. So if I right click on that component and I open that up in another tab, you're now going to see everywhere in the world that that type of device is located, that particular version of that device. So if you notice, there are 2 million of these out there, okay? And they're associated by the IP address, okay? And you can see this is in different countries around the world. You'll see some that are in China, some that are in like the US, for example. You see Comcast, Spain, all over. Now, if you look at the URL, in the URL, there's a search that's been performed in here. So if I come in here and I take off, and I just put QNAP in there, I should be able to go in and get those devices. Let me make sure I got that correct. Okay, here, I'm going to give you this other query. And let me go back and redo this one. So if I take off the version, okay, I will find every one of that type in all the different versions. And you notice that it now went from 2 million to 3 million. Okay, so now I have these 3 million devices. Now I could come in and even make it even smaller and say, hey, show me QNAP. Okay, so if I search for QNAP, I can find every QNAP device, and there's over 10 million IPs that have those, and through over 3,000 domains associated with those. So that tells you how many are out there, how it's probably, you know, over 10 million probably companies or people could have these out there. So it's a way that's available today. So with those QNAPs, there's different software, but think of it, it's that synchronization thing to back up and to have sometimes software running on them. So it's like a server, it's like a little computer in there with a hard drive. And they might have a RAID array where they can like lose a disk or two, but it gives you the capability of having that high functionality to send and receive files with a device that's small enough you can put in your backpack or a big pocket. Now, the other one is Synology. So Synology was also being affected as well. And so this was back in August, they were being attacked too. So when I went through and started looking at this, I said, okay, mine's not directly on the internet at all. It's never been. But I wanted to start looking for those Synology devices. So here's the query for Synology. So basically, all you have to do is, if you do a search, if you click on this little magnifying glass, you get a drop down. And if I choose component and I type in the name of that component, it will search for it. So there are over 7 million Synologies directly attached to the internet. So with this, if you went to that IP address, you would get a login screen for a lot of these. And that's not a good way to do these. There's some advanced things that they can be doing to block the IP address if there's too many failed logins. But you know, it's a gamble, because if somebody can craft something to go and attack it directly without logging in, you would be in trouble. So please protect your NASs, but this is now a way, like for the preppers, if you have a network attached storage device, this is a way you can send and receive data. As long as you have an internet connection, you'll be able to do that. So this is something that I wanted to bring to your attention and show, like, why they were wiping these devices is because they're trying to keep the flow of threat intelligence getting to the people that need it and to the troops. And these devices are facilitating that in such a way now that they're so small and compact to be able to allow these decentralized troops to share information. Any questions on this so far that came in, Alex?
No, I've been keeping up.
Okay. So the next one that I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a different thing. Okay. And this one is going to be like, you're going to try to figure out, how did we find this? And we're going to go through this together. So with every crisis, bad people pop up trying to do bad things. This could be, you know, a government thing, or it could be an individual person. We don't know, but this is bad. So what was happening was people were going against and attacking the UN refugee agency that's trying to work and help Ukrainians. So what this person did was they created a fake typo squatted domain and trying to get people to donate Bitcoin to help the refugees, but it's not legitimate. And we're going to go through and prove it out. Okay. So there was an article that was published, and that's how I found out about this. And then we're going to go through and do it together. So I'm going to give you, we can start off two different ways. We can start off with the bad thing or start off with the good one. Can you please put in the chat which way you want to go? Is it the, there's two different methods, and we'll do both, but I want to know which one to start with. Okay, the bad. Someone said the bad. Okay, so we're going to start off with the bad one. So thank you for doing that. So I'm just going to bring up my information here. Okay, so we're going to start off with the bad one. So this is what the good one looks like. Okay, so let me get the bad domain real quick, and we are going to copy it and use it. So give me 1 second to public indicators, and let me paste that one in. Nope. I need to go there before I do it, so no one gets a virus or something. Okay. So here is the bad domain. So it's unhcr-ukraine.org. Okay. So when we run this query, you're going to notice a couple things. So reputation score of 100, meaning it's malicious. And the reason for that, there was an article published. It's been associated with some infrastructure known to be malicious. The registrar being used, is a lot of people use them to be malicious. The IP address is a resolving IP address that changes quite a bit generally. And if you notice on the graph, it's only been up for 5 days. Okay, it was only up for 5 days. And you can see down below the IP addresses, and I'm going to zoom in because without doing that, you can't really see too much. So give me a second. Okay. So if you notice here, the sources. So I have an additional source on mine, and the reason for that is I created a free Alien Vault account where I can, with their credential, when I query something, it goes out to their API and pulls in some additional information. So if you notice in here, I have RiskIQ site, Kaspersky, Alien Vault, Mnemonic, all saw the this IP address associated with this domain. Okay. Now, remember how we looked at that DNS server and we saw all the servers associated with it? We also pull the IP addresses for those. So that's why sometimes you might notice that something is non-routable, and we'll show it. And you're going, well, how can you scan something that's non-routable? As we go to the DNS server and we pull all the IP addresses associated with those, so we understand what those are. And it might be to a loopback address, a 127.0.0.1. And then during the attack, it might go to a public IP and then back, and we can see that. And whenever we see that flip-flop between a non-routable to a routable, and it's on the same day, you're going to notice it's green. It will show up in the square. And then the triangles mean a new IP address was seen on that day. And the curves on the bottom and the top mean the end of the month or beginning of the month. So here was the end of February and beginning of March. Okay. Now, when we look at this, how can we tell that this is bad? Okay. Well, we've told you it's bad, but now let's go through and see why we're looking at this. So if we look at the WHOIS records, I'm trying to see like who owns it. So, hey, I see it's associated with a previous name. So if I am the UN, it will probably be a UN email address. So that's suspicious on its own right there. So let's look at the certificates. When we look at the certificates and we expand these out, they're using a free certificate authority. Let's Encrypt. So I think the United Nations would probably using their own certificate authority or a paid one, which this doesn't look right. People do use these, but that's also suspicious. So there's 2 strikes against it already. Okay. So let's look at the subdomains. Let's see. Okay. So I see mail, www, and the original domain. Okay. Nothing suspicious there. Let's look at trackers. Okay. So now let's look at trackers. So when I'm looking at trackers, I'm starting to see some unusual things. HTT track source host, HTT track source website. Does anybody know what HTT track is? Have you used it? I used it as a legitimate tool. And I'm seeing that there's some messages coming in. Yes, people are saying yes. So let's take a look at what HTT track is, okay? So if I come into here and I do a Google search for HTT track, it tells me, hey, HTT track is a free and open source web crawler and offline browser developed. So basically it's to duplicate a website. I can go in and copy the entire website offline and have that. So you're thinking right now, when RiskIQ went out and looked at this domain, how did we know that HTT track was used? And how do we know the original place of where that source was? How do we know that? Does anybody know? How can you tell? I'll wait for a quick response. Component pairs, the header. Okay, let me give you something real quick. Okay, so remember I said we're going to look at the website, Muralscan.io to get an image. Okay, so here it is. So what I did was I searched for that bad domain. Okay, in here. So I came in here and I said, okay, give me this domain, and let me go into search, and I pasted it in. Okay. And I saw one from 4 days ago and 5 days ago. Okay. So with that, once I look at those, okay, I can see the image of what that domain looked like. Okay. So this is what it looks like. And it looks just like the real one because it's a copy of the real one. It's using the images from the real one. So how do we know it was a copy? Okay. If I look at the HTTP, okay, and then I want to look at the document, the DOM, the document object model. So I'm going to bring that up. So what this is this is what your browser brings down to the machine, and it starts bringing in all the sources from everywhere, okay? So if I do a Command F and I look for HTT track, I got 2 hits. So one at the top saying, hey, this was added by HTT track. And if I go to the second one, and I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to search for that so it highlights it so we can read it. It says mirrored from www.unhcr.org/UA/EN. So this is for Ukraine in English, and it was copied on Thursday, the 24th of February, at 16:47 GMT time. So now I know the exact time that this threat actor created the backup of the real site. Okay. And I know what he copied. So this is how when we pull in that full document object model, we look for these things. And when we see an HTTP track, we're able to say, what was the original domain it was against? What was the full URL it used? And we're able to give you that information. So by seeing that in the trackers, we immediately know that, hey, this is a copy of something. Doesn't look quite right. It's not registered to the UN. It was registered a regular email. It's using a free Let's Encrypt certificate, and it's a copy of the UN's website. So if we didn't have the reputation score, that would be enough for you to make a determination, go, this is probably not okay. I'm not going to donate my Bitcoin to them. So this is how you can tell. And if we go back through, there's other things that will point to that will tell me that, hey, this might not be correct. So we're going to now go to the legitimate site, and we're going to do this investigation from the legitimate site. So you can see how, if I was the UN, I can look at my own stuff and see, is anybody attacking potential customers, duplicating my website? So let's go from there. So I'm going to give you the real website, okay? And we'll start from here, resolutions. Okay, I'm going to paste this one in. So the real website is www.unhcr.org. Okay, that's the real one. Okay, so with that, you notice now that I have a timeline going back to 2010 where this was available. Okay, so I have data going back for many, many, many years. And over the last 6 months, that's what these squares represent. I have consistent data there. There's no outages inside there. Okay, you can notice in here that all these are in the US. The other one was located in Russia. Huh. Okay, so this is being hosted in Russia. Okay, who's attacking Ukraine right now? And these are like in the US and Netherlands and different places. Okay, the WHOIS information. Let's look at the real WHOIS information. Okay, that's going to their domain, their email address. It's registered to them. Okay, another thing saying that this is probably good. Let's look at their certificates now. Okay, if we look at their certificates, they are paid certificates. Okay, from DigiCert. Awesome. Okay, and I can see all of the other alternative names that are associated with those, and I can see the IP addresses those are associated with. Great. I see that there's not just 3 subdomains, there's 769 different subdomains with it. Okay, the trackers, we had like a few. I think there was like, let's see, how many trackers were there? 14 trackers. Here I'm seeing over 1,000 different trackers, and I'm seeing things for Pixel, Facebook Pixel, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Google, all those different ones. Okay, components. If I'm a threat actor, I'm only going to stand up what I need. Here I have over 732 different components. I have Cloudflare, DDoS protection. If I look at this one, I have 33 components. Not much. You know, I'm using some WordPress, some CMS. It's not much in there. You would expect a lot more from the UN. Okay, and over 1,000 different host pairs. So when I look at the host pairs, I can go to either ones and look at this. So if we're at the bad site and I look at host pairs, you're going to notice that a few things happened. Here's the real website. So if I filter to look at that real website, let me find those real quick. I'm just going to filter those down. You'll notice here a CSS import where they're importing in that website. Okay, so that's where that is pulling all the style sheets, all of the links, different things. Okay, and on the legitimate site, looking at that same one, you're going to find that same information. It might take a minute to refresh and give me those filters, but I can see the same thing from the real website. So when I come in here, I will look for that Ukraine one in here and see if I can find it. It will be, here it is. Okay. So from here, I can see it's also pulling in scripts from the real website. So the parent one is reaching into the child and grabbing something out, doing something with that. So it's pulling in the scripts in here. Okay. So either direction, I can see this relationship because we've talked to both websites. Okay. Now, the other thing is I can look at something good. For example, if I went back to trackers, if I looked at something like the Google Analytic code, okay, here's the Google Analytic code, and I right click on that and I open that up in another tab, we will start to see things like the bad site. And the reason for that is that HTT Track copied the website, copied the trackers. So when you're doing a threat investigation, sometimes things that security people don't have access to, like the Google Analytic codes, things like that, the clicky ID, so things that marketing might have access to, that because of separation of duty, you don't have access to. You might not see this activity by looking at those systems directly. But because we're gathering this gives you the capability now to look at your own stuff and see if anything bad is associated with it. And if they are, that means somebody's duplicating your infrastructure, the way it looks and appears on the internet, to attack your brand, your customers, and potentially your internal users as well. So this is another way to find that bad that bad infrastructure. Now, in the article, it mentioned that it was being paid to a Bitcoin address. And I wanted to explore that Bitcoin address and see it. And this is where it was blocked once I put this into the slides. So when I looked at those Bitcoin addresses to see how much money has been paid to them, because of the blockchain, everything is open ledger, I can look to see that wallet, how much money has been put into the wallet. And I can go through and see how much was sent and received in those wallets. And both of those addresses are empty. So this code to give money to this wallet has been blocked, and it's considered malware. So I went through and tried to put this into my slides, and that QR code blocked it, because no one wants you to give money to this fraudulent website, and it's associated with crypto stealers. So once they get stuff from you, it could potentially empty your wallet and steal other things. So that's this attack that's happening with infrastructure that is mimicking the United Nations refugee center. Any questions that have come in?
Yeah, so I apologize, I wasn't paying attention at the time, but
Okay.
Super Marinian, sorry if I butchered that. He had asked about how you mentioned that you can provide details on the threat from open source and third-party packages on a website, and asked where he can get those details on the tool.
And so he wants to see how he can find out what open source things have happened from an IP or domain.
Yeah, that's where I was confused.
Okay.
Do you mind providing some more?
Yeah, so I'll explain what happened. So, like, for example, we have this bad domain, okay? So if I take this bad domain and I go to the main page of RiskIQ and I search for that, when I search for it, it's going to start showing you information and also hits on those articles on what you searched on. So using the API, for example, I can query that same sort of thing and say, tell me any articles that have come in with this IP, this domain, for example, and see those. Or if I'm looking up a URL, it will look in those articles as well and tell me if something's there. So
he provided, I was kind of more directing that question to him, if he could provide more info. So he's talking about, like, say he has his company name, he wants to know what open source threats or
attacking it or things
OS
like that.
threats. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me go through that. So one thing is, when you have Illuminate and you have a paid license of Illuminate, what we do is we create an organizational view of what we see on the internet that belongs to you. So for example, if I come into this area, this is RiskIQ's digital footprint, everything that's externally exposed on the internet. And with that, we know all of the domains, IPs, certs, hosts, cloud services that we're using. We have that information. So that's the map. If you take the map of the internet, this is RiskIQ's part of the internet. And from that, we filter those articles to say things that belong to you. So for example, if I look down here there's no vulnerabilities or exposures. But if I went in and looked up Tencent, so like if you went to the third party piece, one of them will be Tencent in here. So let me find this one. So Tencent is a hosting provider. So let's take a look at their infrastructure. So when I go to look at their infrastructure, their IPs, their domains, there are some articles that have hit that say this particular infrastructure or domains were listed in these open source threat articles. So some of this might not be their own. It might be somebody's renting space for them, for example, but this is a hit. So this is like how you could see that type of relationship. So this is for the threat intel, for those types of things. But also we look at vulnerabilities. So for example, if I look at high criticality vulnerabilities, insights mean it's more than just a matching of a CVE with a version. It might be that we looked at the banners and maybe asked some different information to really make sure it's high fidelity. So if there was a, let's look at, I'll pick one, a Jenkins server vulnerability. So when I click on that, I will see the vulnerability information, and I'll see all of the assets that have that particular version or that problem that we've identified. And those devices will be listed in here to say, hey, this is version 222.3 this one has. So this gives me the capability of seeing where those things might be. And when we look at insights, it might be that there's chatter associated with this vulnerability. It would also mean that potentially that there is a proof of concept issue with that vulnerability. So if we take a look and I look at that vulnerability details, that risk score might be higher if there's deep and dark web chatter associated with it and a known exploit, and that would be listed here when those are available. So you have all that information. So that's how we link it from your EASM, your external attack surface management aspect, to the threat intelligence and marry that together to filter out that noise. And we'll cover this we covered it in the past at other workshops, and we'll start doing more of those now that people are asking these questions. Now, Barry, do we have the winner of the gift, the American Express gift card?
Yes, Thomas D. D as in dog is our winner this week, and I will reach out to him this afternoon. So congratulations and thanks for joining us today, everyone.
Thank you. So any other questions? That was a great question. Any other ones that you may have? Okay. With that, Barrett, that's all I have for today. I want to thank everybody. I want to bring up the last slides to see what you can do going forward to continue your experience with RiskIQ. Give me 1 second. I'm going to the right slide. Didn't have it queued up. So if you go to community.riskiq.com/learn-more/illuminate, you can sign up. If you sign up with your work email, we will generate the attack surface for you. If you use a free email account like a Gmail or Yahoo Mail, then we're not going to generate an attack surface for you because we only show your organization's attack surface. So with that, please sign up with your organizations. We'll also give you more data to view. If you have a free email account, we'll give you 2 weeks worth of data that you can see. If you sign up with a work email, you'll get 90 days. Is that right, Alex? Keep me honest. 90 days of visibility.
Yeah, 90 days of visibility for
90 days of data visibility. And if you have a paid account, you get it all. You go back to the beginning of time when we started collecting. Please continue and sign up, and we hope that this was useful to you to see how you can extend your detection and response with inside of a SIM or from using RiskIQ Illuminate.
Great. Thanks everyone again for joining us. If you have any questions, reach out to success@riskiq.net and we'll get back to you. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.